Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Talking Cardboard. As always, I'm Brian. You may notice that the gang's a little bit light today, but we still have the heavy hitters. We've got John to my right and Corey to my left. And this week, we're going to be reviewing Role Player.
Alright, here we are with Role Player setup. I'm just going to go over a quick overview. It won't be a complete rules explanation on how exactly to play the game, but this will give you the general idea. At the start of the game, you roll out 7 dice and you place them on your board. Where you place them depends on what you're going after. You've got a class card, a backstory card, and an alignment card that all mean different things to get you different points by the end of the game. For example, we have our class here, Sorcerer. You have these different strength, dexterity, wisdom, charisma, different characteristics of your character here that you are looking to add up your dice in those rows to get within a certain range. If you get within a certain range on your card successfully by the end of the game, you get stars equal to the successes. Stars are worth victory points at the end of the game, so that is what you're generally going after. If you look at your backstory card here, it says Lost in Time. That's my character is an elf sorcerer who's lost in time. You've got these different colored dice on the card here. By the end of the game, you want to make sure that the dice that are locked in on your character sheet are locked in specifically to line up with those colored dice in those exact spots. The more you are successful at doing this, the more points that's worth at the end of the game as well. So I'm going to show you just a quick example of running through one turn. It's very simple. When it's your turn, you roll out the number of dice equal to the number of drafting spots here on the board. So it's 4. And this example is 4. So I roll them out, and I have the option of putting them in numerical order. If there's any ties, I place them in the order that I choose. So I've got the 2 over here, the 5, and then these 2 6s, I can choose where to place those. We'll go like this. The next thing you do in player order is draft a die. Depending on where you draft the die from, that depicts where you are in line for the market to buy a card. So I'm going to choose this first die to give myself the first pick at the market cards up top. And then I just take it and I have to place it in one of the leftmost columns in each row. So if I decide to place it here, we could place it like that, the 3rd row here, for example. But if I choose to place it in this row because it's empty, I'd have to place it in the first spot here on the board like that. After placing a die, you've got these different special actions that you get to do. For example, this one says I get to re-roll one of my dice already on the board after placing a die there. So what I would do, for example, is I could take this low value 1 black die, re-roll it, and put it back where it was. Now it's a 5, a lot better positioning for what I'm going after at the end of the game. Looks like my dexterity needs to be between a value of 16 and 17, and right now I'm at a 5. Plus 2, I'm at a 7. My 2 other dice need to equal between a 16 and 17 by the end of the game. So that re-roll really helped me out. And so as you can see here, after all players have drafted their dice and placed them on their own player boards, which I don't have out here, let's say that were the case, we go in turn order based on the draft card that we drafted our die from. So I am player number 1. I get my first pick at one of the market cards. So for example, let's say I wanted to buy this Jeweled Dagger for 3. It says when scoring attribute goals, +1 value to all gold dice. So this means now I put this as a weapon here. I've got a hand here holding it. That means when scoring attribute goals at the end of the game, all my gold dice have a +1 value, so this 4 is essentially a 5. So there you basically have it. That's the base game of Role Player. It's pretty simple at its core. What you're basically doing is you're drafting dice and placing them in player order and buying cards from the market to help you toward your specific class goals, backstory goals, alignment goal, which I didn't really touch up on. I'll do that real quick here. For example, if I bought this Fearless card, it's worth 4 points at the end of the game. It cost me 9. You see an alignment value here. Let's see if we can see that, of an arrow pointing to the right. That means we look at my alignment card and the alignment cube would move to the right. If at the end of the game this is the place that it's still at, I would get -2 points. So throughout the game, as this is shifting around, buying different cards and doing various actions, I want to make sure I have at least it on the 1 or the 3, some sort of victory points at the end of the game. Definitely don't want to end up in those negative spots. Alright, so let's just touch up here real quick on the expansion to the game, which does add quite a bit. We definitely love it. It's called the Monsters and Minions expansion. Essentially what that adds here is a large deck of minions cards. Here, for example, we have an Ooze minion, which allows you to, instead of buying a card from the market, you can choose to try to attack the minion. For example, this one says +1 combat die for each green die on your character sheet. So looking at my character sheet, I have 2 green dice. You automatically start off with 1, so I get +1 combat die per green, so I get 2 additional dice. It means I get to roll 3 dice against this minion here. I add up my value, I roll an 11, and I look at the minion here. So a 1 to 3, I would have gotten a wound. A 4 to 8, I get 2 experience cubes. But because I got 9 or higher, rolling that 11, I get an experience cube, 2 gold, and 1 crown. What that crown gets me is actually different tokens that'll give you some hidden information on how to better defeat the overall boss at the end of the game, which is kind of a neat touch to the game here as well. It also gets us a trophy. There are different market cards in the game, in the expansion, that give you additional victory points for example, for how many trophies you have at the end of the game, essentially how many minions you've killed throughout the game. The other thing the expansion adds is a final boss. For example, we have a giant troll here, we have a demon, dragon, chimera, vampire, Kraken. So for example, at the end of the game, it's just another way to score some additional victory points based on how well you do against the final boss. At the end of the game, whoever has the most points is the winner. Like I said, this Monsters and Minions expansion adds minions, obviously the final boss monster, and a few other ways to score victory points. Definitely adds some variety to the game. Well, let's get back to the table and hear our final thoughts.
John, what are some of the positive aspects of Role Player?
I just like the overall, theme. You've got this class and you're trying to match this backstory and alignment, and me personally, I try to make them all fit so it makes sense. Like the last game I played, I was a rogue class, so I took like a more mischievous alignment, and my backstory was that I was like a wanderer, so I thought that was kind of cool, and from there the game is just pretty simple and fun. So
you like building a full story that's cohesive?
I do. I try to. With the randomness of getting your alignments and backstories, sometimes you can't do that, but realistically it doesn't affect the game, so I just think it's a cool tidbit.
I think the weirdest combination I ever had was a construct priest, so I'm a robot Jesus.
Yeah.
So Corey, what about you? What are some of the good things about this game?
I agree with that first pro too. I think the game at its base is just a bunch of dice that you're manipulating to fit into a grid, so it's almost kind of just like a puzzle game. But the thematic overlay on the game is really cool with, like you guys said, with the backstory, with your class, your character class. You can really build your whole narrative.
And I know, which is a pro for me, I love being able to make things fit just so, and planning the whole rest of the game, trying to plan that turn by turn.
Yep.
But that is a con for everybody who plays with me, that my turns take a very long time because there are so many things that have to fall into place strategically. If you want to play the game on a surface level, it's fast. You can put as much thought into it as you want, and I typically put a lot. So I can see how that would be a con for everybody playing with me, is it can get a little slow if you've got one or multiple players that really want to make things work just so.
Yeah. It's not really the full fault of Brian though either. I could see a lot of people falling into that trap because there is a lot going on with the different things you're trying to match. You've got the different numbers for the different rows you're trying to match up just right to get to maximize your points by the end of the game. You've got the different colored dice in the right slots. You've got different special powers. When you place a die, you get to manipulate your dice in various ways. You've got cards you get to buy. I mean, there's a whole lot going on.
Yep.
Not to make it sound scary.
I would say, like, with that, another pro of the game is, yes, there's a lot going on, but for the most part, it's simple concepts, like match colors in these certain slots. Like, yes, you have to optimize that, but it's not like a rule you have to really remember. It's just simple. So I like that a lot about the game, and a lot of the ways to score are that, where it's just simple.
Right.
Yeah.
Just takes a little bit of thinking to strategize. So.
Definitely. And we've alluded to this a little bit. The expansion for it, Corey, if you want to show exactly what that expansion looks like. Monsters and minions. This adds so much extra meat to the game. Normally, originally it was just a dice rolling game, but with monsters and minions, you've got a final boss you fight at the end. You have extra options that you can do for attacking minions along the way, which adds a lot more depth and diversity to this game. So there are a bunch of different ways you can go about approaching this. I think that's also a really big pro. A con with that is you got to buy an expansion to the game. Yeah, John? And
this kind of brings into play my one con with the game is the final boss monster thing. Like, it doesn't do enough to the game to make it feel like the boss matters. From our games, you pretty much beat it every time and get some points out of it.
Except for this last time.
Yeah.
Well, that's just you.
Pretty much every time.
Yeah. We both got the max points. But I feel like the boss should maybe have like an effect that, actually alters the gameplay during the main phase of the game instead of just at the end you're fighting it. So
yeah, kind of go off that a little bit too. Comparing just the base game to the base with the expansion, like we said, the expansion does add a lot to the game. The base game at its core is just a simple dice drafting game. Essentially, you're drafting the die you want for your player board, and it's a puzzle on your player board, so you're trying to match different things, kind of like a puzzle. But with the expansion, I do agree with that final boss not really holding much weight to the game, or not really affecting the game enough. It's basically just take some dice at the end of the game, roll them out, and see what you roll. It adds a lot of luck factor to the game too, which I'm not really too keen on. I don't really like a whole lot of luck. The minions in this expansion add a whole lot to the game though. I love the option. If you've got 3, 4, or 5 cards out in the market and none of them look appealing to you, you can go ahead and chuck some dice and see what happens to get some experience or some extra coins or various things with the minions.
So now that you're mentioning a lot of the luck versus skill, Corey, how would you rate skill versus luck on the spectrum?
I think the skill level in this game is pretty mid to heavier when it's kind of more on the tactical side though. So it's skill, very tactful. Am I even saying that right? Tactical. So very tactical on the skill side. The luck factor is not so much unless you're looking at the expansion more so. Just with the rolling against the minions or the final boss, you're rolling to see what your total is, and that has a whole lot of luck to it, which can be mitigated throughout the game based on how well you're doing too. A little bit. Don't really like that luck side of it as much, but overall I think the tactfulness in the game is pretty high on the skill side.
John, I know we were talking earlier about it being kind of luck based. I mean, you're rolling dice. So what do you think about the luck versus skill?
Oh, I think I agree with Corey where there is a lot of luck with just rolling the dice, and that plays a big factor. But with the actions you can take when placing dice, I think you can mitigate a lot of that. Like getting a 1 isn't necessarily bad because you can slot that into the strength row and flip it to a 6 later on, or something.
A lot of
like
dice
that.
Manipulation.
Yep.
Yeah, mitigation.
That's typically why I like to leave that strength roll or that strength row completely open, so that I can be switching ones all the way through the game. I like that.
Exactly. And the draftability of the dice out in front of you too adds a little bit of options to it. So it's not just you roll a bunch of dice and you get what you get. You do have the opportunity to take a lower die, and get first option at the market or killing the minions, or you can take a higher value die and get last option at the market. So I think that's kind of cool too.
Yeah, it's a great balance of skill versus luck, and if you're not doing well, you can totally blame it on luck.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I do.
Great piece of every dice game.
I'm just bad at this one. Yeah.
So, Corey, what do you think about the teachability of this game?
Teachability is fairly easy at its base. Adding the expansion too is not really too difficult to teach. You can pretty much dive right into you don't really have to read the rule book out loud to the group, I don't think. I think you could just kind of dive into playing the game and explain as you go. You roll the dice, you lay them out, and hey guys, we're going to draft what die we'd like. You place it on your board. You just kind of manipulate your puzzle in front of you how you choose, and you go from there.
Yeah, I'd say the symbols on the board are pretty self-explanatory about what each action does. I mean, it literally shows, +1 or -1 to die value for this, or re-roll the die. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You could just show them the board and be like, hey, let's run through these quick, and now you've got it. So other than that, it's basic math for adding up your rows and some color association, and
which may be difficult for anybody above a 3rd grade level.
Yeah, below.
Yes, below.
Below a 3rd grade level. Yeah.
Yes.
But for the most part, yeah, it's fairly simple, I think, to learn. So.
I guess it's also replayability, in my opinion, is really high. Yeah. Every game kind of turns out differently for us based on the class that you get, the starting dice, your different backstory. There's so many different ways that this game could be different. Have either of you guys thought that things have gotten stale at all?
No, and going to where you're picking like your class, you actually pick a color, and from that you have 4 classes to choose from. So even if you get, blue twice, I mean, you still could have a completely different class.
With the expansion, you get 4 options. With the base game, you only get the 2 different sides. But I think that's where the expansion kind of holds a lot of value too, because it adds a whole nother deck of cards you can mix in, and a whole other classes and variations. But even in the base game, there is a lot of variability.
Because even the classes, I mean, they all have their different little special ability that you can use throughout the game too. So that kind of changes the gameplay up from game to game.
Yeah.
And one of the lenses I look through all the time is for people who aren't really hardcore gamers like us. I think if you can get past the top layer of the theme of it being a role player game, and you can break it down to the numbers and the strategy there, it'd be a lot more accessible for non-intense gamers, family members that you just want to bring into the game, or the gaming world in general. I think that that's a really good way to bring them in under the guise of a thematic game. What do you think our ratings would be for role player?
A scale of 1 to 10, I would give this a solid 8. It's a real fun game. The replayability is real high. The variability in the game is real high. You're even though at its core you're just drafting dice and playing with the puzzle, I think just the fact of playing with that puzzle and manipulating it and getting it to maximize it perfectly each game, or the different options you've got to maximize your I don't know, like just all that in itself, just the puzzle aspect is a lot of fun, and it hasn't gotten old for me yet, and I don't think it'll get old anytime soon.
Oh, I completely agree. I know my rating is a little biased. I'd probably go an 8.5 or a 9. Not just because I typically do really well in it, but you can make it as themed as you want. We've still scratched the surface in terms of actually coming up with our characters. But the math behind it, the chance versus skill, all of that is so deep and intertwined. I love playing this game.
And all the different skill cards and trait cards you can buy.
Exactly.
I mean, the deck's so big with the expansion that there's something new coming up every time, and those traits can affect your strategy for the whole game based on what you get.
It's actually annoying, almost annoying, how often this guy requests to play the game at our game days, game nights, because you love it so much.
Yeah, and I can't.
And we say no a lot.
Yeah,
but we say yes sometimes.
Everybody's got to have their easy way.
Yes, unfortunately.
So overall, on this game, is this a definitely buy? Is this something that you'd want to try? Is this something that, hey, if somebody else buys it, you'll play it once? What do you think?
What do you think, John?
Oh, that's tough. I guess I'd be inclined to buy it, but I'd probably be, play it safe, try it out. I think you'll like it. It's not a game you're just going to play once. You're definitely, if you like it, you're going to play it multiple times. So from there, you're going to want to buy it.
I would agree, and going off of that, you need to get the expansion with it. The base game, it's okay, but without the expansion, I can't imagine what the game is like before that. I just can't go back. The expansion is so necessary to it. And even if you personally don't want to buy it, if you are in kind of a gaming community or a group like we are, somebody needs to have this game. It is a staple. It is easy to bring people in, and at the same time, there's a lot of depth where you can really nerd out.
And if the theme doesn't really jive with you as much as you'd like it to, don't really let that turn you off either, because I think at its core it's a different beast. Even though the theme is nice to have, I mean, it's kind of fun to act out who you are and your backstory and that sort of thing, don't get me wrong, but I think if you're not really heavily into fantasy, this game would still be a lot of fun.
Yeah, you still have that whole puzzle theme.
Yep.
Maxing.
So completely agree. So to wrap it up, we love Role Player. We love playing it. It can be as deep and thematic as you want, or it can be light and luck based. It's a very versatile game. We strongly recommend that somebody in your group own this game. So until next time, we're talking cardboard.
No, I don't know what to do with my hands. God, you're the worst.
This is all going in the cut.
Just that part. Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!